So there is this guy named Charles. He is from the streets. He took a 15-year prison plea deal in a couple of robbery cases because he didn't want to tell on his friend. Now the sad part about it is he had nothing to do with what his friend was doing that day when they got caught up. He literally was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. But he stuck to the gangster code and did not tell the police about his friend. Now this is the crazy part. Once he took the plea deal, his life got beyond worse. He didn't speak to anyone in the outside world for 4 months. One day he called his mother. His mom picks up the phone and says, "My son, I'm so happy you called. There's something I have to tell you, but I think it's better for your daughter to tell you." Charles took a deep breath, then said, "Okay, Mom," put her on the phone. His 12-year-old daughter, Milan, got on the phone and started crying. As she cried, she kept saying, "Daddy, I wish you were here. Daddy, I wish you were here." Charles takes another deep breath, leans on the wall, and exhales. He's thinking that his baby girl just misses him. He says, "Baby, what's wrong?" As she sniffles and cries, it was hard for her to get the words out, so she says, "Daddy, Mommy's boyfriend Tim makes me do weird things that I don't want to do to him." He jumps off the wall really quickly, looking confused. "Like what?" he asks, very angry and aggressive. "What do you mean?" She starts bursting out crying. "Daddy, he'd be making me do a whole bunch of stuff. When Mommy goes to work, he comes into my room and does bad things," and went into detail. Now, his mother, who is her grandmother, is hearing everything she is saying. She screams over the phone, "God, help my baby, save my baby, cover her under your blood." As she starts praying, Charles gets heated because he can't do anything about it. Angry and aggressive, he says, "Milan, tell your brother Brian to be at your grandma's house tomorrow. Get a hold of your brother so I can talk to him." Milan, still crying over the phone, says, "Okay, Daddy, I'm going to try to get a hold of him." With his voice trembling, Charles says, "I'm going to call you guys tomorrow." She starts screaming, "Please, Daddy, call again tomorrow, please." The next day, Charles calls his mother's phone. His son Brian picks up. They both are excited to hear from each other. Charles cuts the happy conversation short and says, "Listen to me, son. I know you heard what happened to your sister." Brian, his 18-year-old son, says, "Yes, Dad, I heard what happened." Charles says, "Brian, without saying too much, I need you to go pay Tim a little visit." His son Brian, speaking in code, says, "Okay, Dad, I'm going to visit him with an early birthday gift." Charles says, "I'm going to call tomorrow and we will see how it went from there." His mother gets on the phone and starts yelling at him right away. "Don't you send that boy over there to try to do anything," she screams at her grandson. "Brian, if you go over there, I will hand you over to the cops myself." As she's yelling, she and her grandson argue in disagreement. The phone hangs up. The next day, Charles calls his mom again. His mom picks up and says, "Baby, I'm so happy you called. I got something to tell you." He puts his arm on the wall, starts rubbing his head out of pure excitement, smiles and says, "What's going on?" He believes that his 18-year-old son just got revenge for him. His mother takes a deep breath, her voice trembling, and says, "Baby, your son Brian passed away in the operating room at 1 a.m. this morning." His eyes bulge out, his mouth drops, and his heart starts beating really hard. He grabs his chest and says, "Mom, what are you talking about?" His mother, crying, says, "Charles, Brian went over to his stepfather Tim's house with a weapon, pointed it at the man's house, and said what he was going to do to him. The man who took advantage of your daughter came to the door with his weapon. He told Brian to leave the property, but Brian said he wouldn't leave until he finished what he came for. He pointed the weapon at the man, and the man started firing. He shot Brian 3 times. Brian was pronounced dead at the hospital on the operating table." She started crying. Charles is in complete shock, frozen, unable to believe that his son just passed away. Tears start flooding his eyes and he falls to the ground, crying, weeping, and screaming. "No, no!" He's screaming now. "He took my son. He took my son." His cellmate gets on the phone with his mother and says, "Hey, I'm just going to hang up because I don't want to burn his minutes up. I know he's going to need them." So they hang up and it's eating him up inside. Now he's thinking to himself, if I was just there, my daughter would have never gotten taken advantage of. Even if she did, I could have been there to protect her. And if I was there, my son would still be alive right now. He looks up and starts staring at the walls. He realizes that he chose his friends over the family he was supposed to protect. He starts realizing that his friends are not his real friends because he feels like if they were, they wouldn't have let him take the fall for something they did. But now he's deep into it and he can't turn back. A few days go by and he's still feeling sad and depressed, but he's getting back to being normal. On the day of his son's funeral, he starts weeping because he couldn't be there. He calls his mom and his 12-year-old daughter picks up crying, saying, "Daddy, I am so sorry." He says, "Sorry for what?" She says, "My brother is gone because of me. I shouldn't have said anything." His heart sinks into his stomach. He feels like he wants to throw up. He's thinking to himself, why does my daughter feel like this is her fault? So he says, "Baby, it's not your fault, it's mine." He slips up and says, "I chose not to be there. I chose to do this time." She starts weeping more and says, "Daddy, why?" He says, "Baby, why what?" She says, "Daddy, why did you choose to be there and not choose to be here to protect me?" Now he feels so disappointed and like he has failed as a father. He's ashamed to be on the phone with his 12-year-old daughter, the one he can't protect right now. He starts weeping uncontrollably. "Milan, baby, I got to call you back." The little girl starts screaming, "Daddy, please don't hang up, please don't hang up." He couldn't take it. He says, "Baby, I gotta go," and hangs up. Now he's stressed out. He can't sleep and he can't eat. He feels like he failed as a father, a son, and now he's irritated with the dudes he's been hanging around, so he doesn't call his mom for a couple of days. One day, he starts feeling better and calls his mom. His mother picks up the phone and says, "Baby, I'm so happy you called. I got something to tell you." Charles, confused and stressed out, said, "What, Mom? What do you have to tell me now?" She said, "The man that took advantage of your daughter and the one that took the life of your son passed away yesterday." He jumps up with so much joy and excitement and says, "God don't like ugly. God don't like ugly." He is beyond excited and getting emotional. But she says, "Charles, I got something else to tell you." He's thinking it's going to be more good news. She says, "Charles, please try to stay calm. Josh was the one that took his life." He smashes the wall and says, "You're talking about my 15-year-old son, Josh?" She says, "Yes." He starts weeping. Please subscribe for part 2.